wearable art is a very special element of the contemporary fiber arts. It's something that's very different from fashion, and it's something that many artists are turning to, coming from various disciplines. The works in this exhibition are specifically geared towards pieces that can be worn. And to anyone seeing the exhibit, they'll be very surprised to look at some of them and say, well, this is not something certainly that I would wear every day. Granted, many of these pieces are things that would be worn for a special occasion, but they are definitely wearable works. Many of the artists in the show are actually coming from the background of being painters or sculptors, and are viewing their works still as pieces that can be hung on the wall, but they like also the added dimension that the works can come down from the wall, and when they're worn and taken out into the street or into a public place, becomes a special kind of communication between the artist and the wearer. And the wearer is definitely making a statement about his or himself or herself, and then the viewer. So you begin to find art in very unexpected places and situations, and it's a special kind of communication, I think, that the artist would not normally have if they stuck to their traditional discipline.
I believe that I got into the work I got into because my mother was an artist, and I was always around art, and it eventually came about that I needed something other than my dance career to follow, because I was in dance and I decided I wanted to go away from it. So what I got into was I just picked up knitting very accidentally. I don't know why that particular medium, but I enjoyed doing it, and I decided I wanted to put the two items together, and I started making paintings into sweaters. The influences come from everywhere. I could be on a trip somewhere and see an idyllic scene out in the country, and that would influence something I would then do. Or I could see another piece of artwork that I would then want to sort of render into my own work. Or I would just make it up out of the air just because I remembered seeing something somewhere in my mind and just want to create the color concept more than an actual design or a picture. With the yarn that I use, sometimes I just make that up as I go along. I may start out with one kind, but also I should say that you can't just use everything you come up with together. You have to practice a bit with it and see how the yarns interact with each other. Some tend to push the stitches out more, and it would cause the knitted form to become misshapen a bit, so you have to work with them. But I try to play with it as I go and see what looks interesting together as I'm working. Knitting is a meditative process for me. The form of knitting itself moves along for me with the colors, and I can create that way very nicely. I'm using a lot of color, and I'm constantly searching in my mind as I'm knitting where I'm going to take this process. And I might be looking at the colors together and the different texture together, and my mind is really working in a very fast-paced way, although my hands and the actual process of knitting is very slow and meditative. I like the idea that the art can be wearable and that it can be seen outside the gallery space. Most of the pieces that I do are pretty extravagant and unusual, and they won't be worn every day all the time. They're usually going to be more special occasions. But I also know that people who go skiing buy a lot of my sweaters, so they're on the ski slopes as well, so they are out all the time. And I want the pieces to be very wearable. It's important to me that they're not weighing too much or have too many things on them that would make it so that they really couldn't be worn. I want them to be a useful item, but not necessarily trendy, so that it would be worn out in a year. It could be worn 10 years from now, and it would still look right.
The whole idea for my work is that the person who's wearing it should feel surrounded by a field of color, that it gives them an emotion or a feeling that they might associate with that color. So it's very emotional as opposed to graphic or oriented towards pictures per se. It's really about evoking an atmosphere, a feeling, a color, an idea. It should be seen as maybe how someone feels about themselves at the moment, that they've got these colors on to evoke a feeling about themselves or they want to show someone how they're feeling at the moment. They're wearing bright reds because they're feeling very strong and happy, or maybe they're wearing muted tones because it's dark outside and it's fall and they feel sort of quiet. Mainly, I want people who buy my garments to buy them because the garments remind them of something about themselves or a feeling they might like to have. I've always enjoyed hand knitting, and one day I was going to a designer's studio and I saw this home knitting machine, and I realized that I could buy a machine like this and work at home, and that was why I decided to do the knitting on this scale. Colors usually come depending on how I feel at the moment. Like if I'm up very late at night and I'm thinking about something that may have happened during the day. Let's say I felt angry, I might really work with dark and passionate colors. If I'm in a light mood, I might then go over and work with pastels. It really depends on how I feel at the moment. My husband is an artist and he works with a lot of painters, so we have a lot of art and I see a lot of paintings and drawings, so those colors influence me a lot, how someone might work with colors in a painting or a drawing or a pastel. I like the idea of people hanging the pieces on the wall, and if they're put on a dowel and hung on the wall, then they can be seen in their entirety. The colors can be shown and the ideas behind them will be seen then quite naturally. The way I started doing these pieces, though, came from a dream, from a trip across country. I dreamt I made a garment incorporating all of the colors that we saw on our trip. We went in October, so you can imagine how beautiful it was all over the United States. So when I came back, I made my first kimono, and it had 53 colors of thread in it. And each part of the kimono showed a different part of the country in feeling and color at the time. I would like to say that the simplicity of the way that they look belies the amount of work that's done in them. But the whole idea of showing this work is that it be as simple as possible, and that the process, that people will know that the process is a meditative one and very almost Zen-like in feeling. The idea is to make it very smooth and very perfect looking, as opposed to having it be busy and complicated.
What I do is process information as an artist. I experience a certain amount of experiences, and I find that the broader a spectrum of experience I can ingest or partake of, the more it comes out in the work, and that the closer I get to really understanding and following that point, the more of an artist I become. I think that's what being an artist is about, is really being, you just draw in all the information and it comes out of you. I mean, I look sometimes, I just can't believe what comes out of my fingers. I have no conscious awareness of the decision to do this. It's just coming. I don't know where it's coming from at times. Many of my pieces are like that. I don't have a clue where they came from. At one point, with every project, there is a moment where there's an actual flash of concept, image. And then from that moment on, it's sure architecture and engineering and physical labor and a lot of magic and a lot of other components that go into making that concept into something. Changes come along, new ways, new approaches. It often evolves to be a different project, but sometimes some of the most interesting things happen by accident. And then if you just look at an accident and think, how can I use this? What can be done with it? Something pretty exciting can come out of it. When I was working in the Little Hoosic River one time, on the riverbed, on the rocks, I was working with kimonos that were cut out already, so I could engineer a design so that I could, plan it out as it lay there. And all of a sudden I noticed some of the sleeves were missing, and I realized that they had floated downstream. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, well, actually, I think a kimono without sleeves would be really wonderful. And that's been one of the best things that I do. I just love these sort of sleeveless, they're like long coats. And I mean, you just, I guess if you accept things with a sort of a sense of humor and a good eye, you can find a way. I reach things in painting that are so centering and so calming, and they draw me in such a way. I mean, I think it shows in the silk, though, too. I think there's something extraordinary about the fact that the silk is the print off of those moments. One of the most important aspects to my work is the fact that I do it in many different places, under many different conditions. I am very different each time I remove myself to a new place. I can very quickly get to work almost anywhere, but it's remarkable, the surface of a beach, how it changes how I feel and how I relate to the work, and also how the actual color goes down on the silk on the sand. The way I feel in a place like Little Hill here, where, you know, I just feel very rooted. I feel like the silk kind of grew here. There's some sense a lot bigger than I am that put me in that silk in that particular point. But there's riverbeds that I work in where I work on the stones and they're polished smooth and the sun is bright and harsh and it dries my silk. I put the dye down and 5 minutes later it's dry and it's captured and it doesn't move because it's bright and sunny and crisp. And the rock surface works with the color and creates a pattern and creates an effect. I mean, it's just extraordinary, the different surfaces and what you get and how they work with you. Right now it's misting. That will change the dye I put down this afternoon. It'll take a little pointillist dot and it'll blur it. And if somehow it poured for a second and stopped and the sun were to come out, it would take that and it would stop it. Well, if it poured, it would wash it again, and then if it came out and it was sunny, it would stop it again. And you could capture that on silk. I mean, it's almost like photography in that sense. It's really quite exciting. I try often to get print-offs off my surfaces. I can get print-offs sometimes off of my cardboard from the last project I work on, sometimes when I least expect it. I think it's extraordinary to think that my work would travel to other countries and touch people that of other languages. I remember one time at my first major museum show, and I went into the gallery a quiet afternoon after the show opened, and there was a Japanese gentleman who, with hands behind his back, was studying one of my pieces, and it was just such a thrill. I mean, to just watch this man, I mean, he must have spent, I was there for 20 minutes, and he just was standing there studying my drawing on this one kimono, and it was a very powerful moment for me. It's very nice.